We are live. Let's look at this. Isn't this a miracle? All these, we're in 3 different places, 4 different places, internet, Mac Pros, cameras, audio, and everything's working. So let me see if I can point. I can point correctly over. No, see, that's backwards. Over here. This is Charlotte Juergens, the director of the film. Down here is Mark Juergens, the editor. He edited it in Final Cut Pro 7, which we are going to talk about. And then right below me is Lydia Robertson, the assistant editor, and a bunch of other hats. I didn't want to put them all in the same title because didn't have room to fit. I always got to condense things a little bit. So this is a film about, Charlotte, why don't you tell us what the film is? I'm going to play the trailer in a little bit, but let's talk about it a little bit. I have a lot of questions, technical and specifically about your journey.
Thank you. Thank you for giving us this opportunity. It's great to be able to be on this program. And I can tell you a little bit about the film. So it's a very personal film about my experience on a pilgrimage with a group of D-Day veterans to retrace their route from World War II. So I was 20 years old when I shot the film, and the veterans were all 20 years old when they landed on Omaha Beach on D-Day. So it's a film that's, less about World War II history than about what it means to grapple with that history today. For the people who, 70 plus years later, at this point, it's almost 80 years later, are, still dealing with those memories. And for people in my generation who, feel very distant from those events, but it's still possible to talk to people from that generation. And so, this film is, I think, kind of unique among World War II documentaries because it's really from the eyes of a 20-year-old woman trying to figure out how to relate to that moment in history. And mostly it's a story about friendship across generations and, memory and connection. So,
absolutely. Yeah. So one of the questions you asked one of the veterans, and there's a lot of questions you asked that really struck a nerve, in a nice way. You asked him about if he gets questions from school kids in the United States. And he said, not so much, not so much. But over here in France, lots of questions, lots of questions about.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that a big difference is that in Normandy specifically in France, the war was on their land, right? And
Absolutely.
so for those kids, it's the story of their hometown, it's the story of their, you know, their immediate family a few generations back and what happened on their land. And I think in the US, just it can be easy for, I think, young kids to have World War II reduced to a series of names and dates that you have to memorize for standardized tests. And that's just not a very personal or emotional way of relating to the history. And I think it makes it hard to really kind of grasp what it actually meant for people who were only teenagers and,
Right,
young
right.
adults when they were participating in it.
So it's, go ahead.
A quick aside as the editor, there is a scene where we see multiple sets of kids with vets in different villages in France, and I might expect, the editor had to work really hard to find those images of kids and vets. No, they were everywhere. All the kids treated them like
Everywhere.
they were rock stars. I mean, it was really blew my mind. Yeah.
When I was watching you retrace and the veterans retrace steps, and I'm thinking they were here as 20-year-olds in the midst of war, risking their lives in this exact spot in some circumstances. And the sand and the sunken roads, it was just, the idea of, I'm trying to think of when I go back to my old neighborhood, sometimes it's emotional for me. But something as traumatic and as important as that event, that is just absolutely chilling. It gave me chills lots of times when I was watching that.
Thank you for saying that. Yeah, I mean, I think that, some of these vets had been more comfortable talking about their experiences over the years, and some were not. But I think that for some of these veterans who were in their late 80s and 90s, going through those areas and not knowing if they would ever be able to do so again, kind of something shifted where they felt like now was the moment that they wanted to talk. And I just felt really very honored to, be there with my camera at that moment.
So what camera did you have when you shot that?
Lydia, it was the Sony A7
R2.
Is that right? Yeah. Sorry, I'm using
Yeah,
a different Sony now.
it was the Sony A7 R2, and you had 4 H1 zoom recorders and 3 high quality lavaliers. So everybody was recording independently. Lots of dual sync that had to be sunk up later.
Well,
Yeah, no, Lydia is an extraordinary technical producer and oversaw kind of all things technical about this project. I mean, for me, I was very focused on the story, and I think if you see the film, you'll realize that all of these conversations with the veterans were incredibly emotional. So I was really trying to focus on being there with them emotionally in those moments. And I felt very grateful to have the luxury to just, have a technical producer who I could trust implicitly to figure out the situation on the ground and what I would need to be able to have a, technically smooth shoot
right. No,
and
of
be
course. Of
provided with
course.
those materials and just kind of go with it. So
But
she
but
knows a
realize
lot
I
more
wasn't
about the
there with
decision
you,
making.
so she
It's true.
actually
It's true.
had
I was
to.
there alone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she had to do
But
everything herself.
yeah, it was kind of an interesting combination of being a one woman crew, but having an amazing team back in New York who I could consult with, and who could, help with the decision making about what gear we needed to make it happen.
Absolutely. So one of the things, let's play, I'm going to play a short bit of the promo clip so people get an idea of the film. And then we'll get back into, because this audience is mostly interested in technical things.
Yeah.
They want to know cameras, they want to know audio, they want to know Final Cut Pro, they want to know storage, they want to know, but we're going to blend that in with other details of your journey. So let me see if I have that here. Where is the video? Video. Did I replace that with something? I'll have to pull it up over here. Here we go.
You want to know about D-Day?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to tell Ruth's story.
He has a great story to tell about his legs. He was the wildest kid I ever knew in my life.
Would you like to see some foxholes?
I would love to see some foxholes.
Right.
All the roads are sunken roads.
Some are more sunken than others. Dear heart, I have great feeling for you and what you're doing, and appreciate what you're doing. And I want you to totally see the area, touch the sand, and see the tide.
29. Let's go! There's almost 15,000 Americans still in Normandy. We owe it to them to go back and visit their graves.
Comme le temps passe.
Bonne journée.
Perfect. There's so many different characters that I met, the veterans. I love the guy that started calling you his granddaughter.
Arden.
Yeah.
Arden. At the very beginning, you dropped your camera or whatever, but I'm not sure when you were on the train. It wasn't the camera you were filming with, was it? Because I didn't see. Oh, it was?
It was.
Okay.
Yes, I had it on a what is it? The
Gorilla
Gorilla
Pod.
Pod.
Okay.
And I thought that I had the top part of it locked, and I didn't. And I let go of it for a second, and the entire thing came like crashing down. And I turned it off after that, and it wouldn't turn back on. I thought that I'd broken the camera. It was a very mortifying moment. But
you left that in the film. You left that in the film.
Yeah.
You could have cut it out.
Well, we debated that quite a bit.
We did debate that.
I liked it. Yeah.
Ultimately, I think that, it helps to kind of underscore the fact that there's a human being behind the camera, and that this is not a film made with like a voice of God kind of perspective. It's not like the story of D-Day. It's the story of a few people developing very close friendships in a very emotionally charged time, and I think that I wanted to be honest about the fact that kind of intimacy doesn't happen really quickly, it happened pretty quickly, but it doesn't happen instantaneously. And sometimes it can be hard trying to figure out how to talk to somebody of the greatest generation who feels like they're up on this massive pedestal, you know? And I was very nervous and I felt very intimidated at first. But then, you know, as we just kind of realized that we're all human beings and relaxed around each other,
Sure.
it all started to change in a way that really changed my life.
It must have been very difficult when you had to leave.
Yes. It was very clear to me that I would never be seeing all of them together again. I was really worried actually at some points along the way that one of the characters who's you know, not one of the main characters in the film, he's a cousin of a main character in the film. He had Parkinson's, and I was very concerned for his health on the trip. And it, you know, the fact that these guys were in their 90s made, you know, mortality feel very much kind of the elephant in the room at all times. And saying goodbye was really, really incredibly hard. Yeah.
I mean, it was hard for me watching it. I'm like, how would you say goodbye to these guys? It was just, and in that, one of the questions I have, you had a photograph when he was talking about the little girl that went like this, but that wasn't the real girl, right? It was the woman that became one friend.
Yes, it was
Yeah.
it was a photograph that she had from the war.
Okay.
And yeah, I mean, Mark, do you want to speak a little bit about our process with developing that in the edit?
Well, so Don had his own version of an experience that happened to him where he was on reconnaissance. He came back, a little girl helped protect him from the Germans. He never knew who that girl and the mother were. Then he met Suzette decades ago, and in his mind, he consciously decided this woman, who's French, is the right age a little girl would have been, and I will project that on her. So it was a conscious decision. He knew it wasn't her, but there were times then where like it felt like it was a changed narrative, and that he would almost believe she was, even though he knew that she wasn't. And he had told all of his family this, but she doesn't speak English. She had never heard this story till Charlotte was there with them, and then Charlotte explained it, and Suzette is just brutally honest. So the whole room went like, oh my God, she's going to say I wasn't the little girl.
Right. Exactly.
But we shouldn't say what happens, because that's the end of the movie. We don't want to give away the end.
No.
Well,
and I haven't.
Yeah, the main thing that I was going to say is that at that moment, it reminded me, I don't know if you're familiar with the book, The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien. And one of the things I love about that book, which, you know, is about the Vietnam War, it's a very different moment in history, but I love the way they talk about kind of determining the story truth versus the actual truth when it comes to PTSD and trauma, and how sometimes it's important to figure out the facts of what happened, but also the narratives that are created out of an effort to try to find some meaning during a moment of intense trauma are also, I think, worth paying attention to as well. So that was part of the decision making too.
I think, yes, I agree with that. I think Ken Burns did a good job with that, the Vietnam War documentary that he did. So there's so many emotional parts on this. I mean, of this documentary that you did. But let's get into some of the details. People can go see it online, I presume, at the usual places. Well, the website is, let me pull that up real quick, is sunkenroads.com, right?
Yes, sunkenroads.com. So you can go there and go to events. Right now, we will actually be live in a movie theater in New York from the day after Thanksgiving through December 2nd. So that's November 26th through December 2nd. We'll be at Cinema Village Theater in New York City. And we would love to see you there. We're doing Q&As every day. And then we are also right now on virtual cinema. So it is not streaming on, Netflix and Amazon and places like that. Because right now we're still in the theatrical mode. But if you go to events, you can see there are many different streaming virtual cinema options, and you can just pick whichever local theater you want to help support with your ticket. You can see there's a LA theater, etc. You can just click on the ticket link, and that will take you to a place where you can rent the film on virtual cinema.
Ah, fantastic.
Because of COVID, very few of our theatrical releases were able to be live
in person.
And so we have a very large variety of theaters that are willing to do virtual cinema, given the realities of COVID. And we have had in the last weeks in-person theaters as well.
Yeah, I think that virtual cinema is really exciting because any virtual cinema screening can be accessed by anyone from anywhere. And, you know, we have a great assortment of theaters, but if they were all in person, then people who happen to live in other parts of the country or other parts of the world still wouldn't be able to see it. And right now, anyone can access those virtual ones. So I find that really great, especially for folks who might have limited mobility.
Even our viewers in France and Germany and everywhere, England, everywhere, they can watch it from anywhere.
Yeah. I went across, when I was in Calais, France, I went across the channel back to England when I was over there. I've been over there a few times. And that was that boat. It seemed like it took forever. It was a big old gigantic boat, just like a big turtle floating in the water. But I remember seeing, did I see the cliffs over there? I forget which they were. I remember they were white. I'm not sure if they were the White Cliffs of Dover or not. Mm-hmm. I think for some reason I think they were, but that was, that was a long, I went there in the 70s, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
So so we got, I don't want to spend any more time on the emotional part because people can watch the film, because people can watch it. And so you were mentioning about these virtual screenings. Are they like for a limited time, like a theater would normally have a movie? Is that how that works?
Yes, thankfully they can go on for a little bit longer than a theater would normally have it in a movie, but most of them are available through kind of early December right now. And you can see the dates for each one. And as they, stop carrying the film, then we will, put them into past events rather than present events. So
I see.
The ones that are there, they all should be up and running right now. And then, there will be, if you go to our website, you can also sign up for a newsletter where I will keep you posted on all future events, including our eventual streaming release. And we have an exciting few other in-person events that are in the works right now too. So
are you keeping them secret? Oh. It's gonna be great though.
Yeah. Is that right? It's going to be good?
That's all I'll say for now.
Okay.
Yeah, I would recommend that people sign up for the newsletter, and I will keep you posted as soon as things are official.
So one of the things that when I talked to Lydia's been on the show before, she said this thing was edited in Final Cut Pro 7. So Mark, that's your department. Tell me why. Well, put it this way. Final Cut Pro 7 was a fantastic NLE. Final Cut Pro 10 still doesn't have some of the features that Final Cut Pro 7 has. But I'm curious as to why Final Cut Pro 7 for the editing portion.
I would not say that I'm technically focused first, but with the gray hair, I'm old enough to have started out in linear tape and 35 millimeter for years. And I still remember when Edit Droid Montage first were announced. I started working in Avid in 93. And I never found it really useful to be right on the edge of learning something new when part of my job is to edit efficiently. So, I appreciate Final Cut 10. I looked at it some at the time, but I've been using Final Cut 7 for years then, and it wasn't being supported at that point. It had not been for years. And but But I had multiple editors who wanted to continue working in Final Cut 7. And that became more and more difficult because I could not even update the system software on my computer.
Right.
Run anymore.
Right. That's nice.
Right. So it was largely a matter of efficiency so that I could move as quickly as possible and focus on creative things. And I had it, but it was tough. It's the last film I've cut in Final Cut 7 because I had to update my computer after that.
Maybe it was the last film ever cut on Final Cut 7.
Yeah. No, wasn't Knives Out cut in Final Cut 7?
Oh, really?
Yeah. One of those. Yes, one of those big films. I think it was Knives Out from Korea. I think it was cut in Final Cut 7. Which was
a problem. I had people midway through who updated their system and they could no longer access the project.
You have to pay attention to those sneaky updates. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So
I worked in 7 for many years too, so I know it very well and could help build the system and be an efficient assistant editor for Mark in 7. But for Charlotte, since she had no experience using any editing software, having her start out the assistant editing the basically just every day after she shot, she'd have to work in something to start organizing the footage, or else 40 days of shooting on your own with no one there to help you, we'd lose the thread, right, of what happened when. She did everything on Final Cut Pro 10 and prepped everything in Final Cut Pro 10. Yeah. And then when she came back, it was given to me. And I did all the syncing in 10 and output the new masters. And of course, we're talking about anywhere 4 to 5 stereo streams of audio and ProRes HQ video married into individual new files.
The new master file.
Yes, exactly.
I was going to ask her. I just presumed it was going to be ProRes. Now, what kind of storage did you use? Did you use a RAID or individual drives?
We did individual drives because RAIDs have issues. So we had 5 6 terabyte enterprise drives, and they were the Seagate Red Pros.
Okay.
Mark had one, Charlotte had one, I had one, and we had one in a lockbox.
And how did you keep them in sync? How'd you
Sorry?
keep them in sync? How'd you keep them in sync as you were going?
I literally did all the syncing and created new masters that are multi-track masters. So Mark didn't have to keep things in sync. He didn't have to worry about sync. He worked with multi-track masters. So each master HQ file had 8 to 12 individual audio files built, mushed into it.
Now, did you make sure Mark backed up his Final Cut Pro 7 project file? Because that's important.
Certainly. And he also emailed them to me.
Okay.
As well.
I'm paranoid about that. I mean, another thing that we did intentionally from the beginning was each drive had the same material in the same place.
Yes.
Identical.
You can just then email a Final Cut 7 sequence and it will play, and that worked out pretty well. And at that time, I was doing that in other projects as well. So
so I always kept
across the country and just email the sequence, and it would.
Exactly. Right. Mark and Charlotte and I always had a computer with Final Cut Pro 7 on it.
Yeah.
Regardless, I had an iMac with Final Cut Pro 7 in one edit room in the house, and the Pro Mac, not the iMac, but the Mac Pro upstairs in the main edit room where I did my personal work, and also I did all of the. So I would literally carry that drive upstairs to the other edit room to access the media, to do any media management I needed to do, and then bring it back down, make sure it was matched, and tell Charlotte, okay, this is the folder you put these new images that you sent us in, that kind of thing. Everything had to be identical at all times.
Now, did you organize in the Finder before you made the Final Cut Pro library?
No, Charlotte made everything in Final Cut Pro, right, Charlotte? No, she did it in the Finder and then Final Cut. What do you say?
Yeah.
Your process in the field.
So in other words,
I think I organized it in the Finder, and then I did I tagged things with keywords and stuff in Final Cut.
Right. anything big, I always organize in the Finder before I make a Final Cut library. As a matter of fact, I even have, because somebody asked me one time, well, how do you import the footage? I said I have a dummy Final Cut Pro library that's only for importing. And then I'll go into that library, pull the clips out of there, put them in the Finder, organize them the way that I want them, name them the way that I want them, etc. Then I'll create a Final Cut Pro library based on that new folder structure.
Right.
And one of the things people say is, well, I like the simplicity of being able to take the library and just back it up or transfer it. Same thing. I have one master folder. The library's inside of it. All my folders of media is inside that one folder. So if I want to back it up or archive it, same thing. One folder, drag it over, make a copy, back it up, whatever. So I do the same thing. Now, when I'm doing a short one, I don't worry about it.
Right. With these features, we're talking 6 terabytes. So dragging folders is harder. So Charlotte will have built it in on several 2 terabyte drives. Like Camera Originals all fit on 1 2 terabyte drives because that's the H.264 file that the A7R2 makes, the Sony A7R2 makes. But as soon as you make them into ProRes HQ files, particularly multi-track,
they're very big.
Multi-track, they're huge, and so
they're very big.
You're right. So things had to be extremely. Everything is media, leave in place media. Everything is in the Finder the way it needs to go. We're now with the new film using Kino, and that is a really great Finder utility for for things. But that wasn't around then, so it was all in the Finder, and then Final Cut Pro 10, and then converted into a big project with external media for Final Cut Pro 7.
So Eric Emmerich asks, what did Lydia use to sync sound with picture?
I used a number of things. I started to use Final Cut, but it wasn't powerful enough and didn't work well enough. And I'm trying to remember the software I used. It was so many years ago. I probably still have it in here. It was a major syncing. It was syncing software, major syncing software.
Sync and Link?
No, I don't think so. I'm going to check in my Finder right now. See if I can find it.
We discussed Pluralize, but I don't remember if that's what you used.
It might have been Pluralize, actually.
Okay. And Eric asked another question. How many hours of footage, raw footage, did you have?
A lot. It was 40 days. 40 days of. Mark, do you have an idea? I know it's 40 days of about 6 hours a day shooting.
So that's 240.
Something like that.
Wow.
And so it took me a year to sync everything and output all those files.
Okay.
Part-time.
Yeah. Yes.
Part-time.
Yes. Of course.
Just to do the syncing,
So Charlotte used Final Cut Pro 10 to ingest or the organization. I guess she shot every day, Charlotte, and then every day you got the footage into Final Cut 10?
Yes, it was a really kind of crazy schedule because we had, events with the veterans from really very early in the morning. I'd say like 7 a.m. We had to meet every day and sometimes go until 10 p.m. So then I would stay up until like 2 or 3 or 4 organizing the footage and doing all of the keywords and everything, and then get up a couple hours later. So it's a very exhausting, very crazy time, but was obviously very worth it.
So how many hours did you spend? So it was 40 days. You filmed for 40 days, about 6 hours a day. I guess there might have only been 6 hours of footage a day, but I was with the veterans from around, again, 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. every day. Okay.
Right. It was somewhere between
it was completely
5 to 8 hours of video, but it wasn't on the whole time.
Yeah.
Goodness knows. I'm surprised I can't remember that software syncing. I'm so sorry.
It wasn't
no longer on the
Pluralize.
system.
Yeah, Pluralize that's the famous one. That's one of the famous ones.
Well, we weren't talking about it back then, so.
I'm checking to see if I have any syncing software now besides, I'm using Tentacle Sync right now. So it's that's just night and day. But it was.
Yeah, the technical sync
yeah.
uses they record was it a time code on one of the audio tracks, right? Of the
It
camera.
was not pluralized. I'm looking at pluralized right now. It was
Okay.
not pluralized. It was another one.
Okay.
Maybe
But
we can
anyway,
get back to you on that.
It started in Final Cut Pro 10, the ingest organization. Then Lydia got that, and she made a Final Cut Pro 7 compatible timeline project. What did you use for that?
Not a timeline. All I did was
Just the media.
we used the Finder media that we made so meticulously correct. I duplicated Charlotte's file structure from the original media, and so we have a folder called Original Media with all of those with all of those files in it, and then we have a duplicate media of all the upresed, and it was based on date and time and location. Everything is named exactly what the media names were all named. So you have the original media, which has the camera name, and then you have the new media, which has date, interior, exterior, location, description, and then the original camera name at the end. And the folder that it's in has all of that information too. So it's very easy to find.
Gotcha. So you just used Final Cut Pro 10 initially just to make the master clips, and then Mark got them and he did the editing. Now, once he did the editing, it went back to Final Cut, right?
Went back to Final Cut 10.
Final Cut 10, I'm sorry, Final Cut 10.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, what did you use to transfer the Final Cut Pro 7 to Final Cut Pro 10? Because I tell you, when they showed us Final Cut Pro 10, the initial launch 2011 at the NAB Super Meet, I watched those films, those bootleg films that they had meticulously and took notes. And one of the questions I said was, how did they get that Final Cut Pro 7 timeline into Final Cut Pro 10? And of course, there was no way to do that with an app. They had to do it manually.
Well, there's a software, there's a whole bunch of companies that do this, but there's one company that does it really well, and I used that.
Lumberjack Systems, right?
It was like, I'm trying to remember the name of the company. Goodness gracious, Digital Rebellion had stuff.
Okay.
And that was useful. And what else? I guess I used the Digital Rebellion software, and I used DaVinci. So we went out of Final Cut Pro 7 through DaVinci into Final Cut Pro 10.
Oh, okay.
Right? And so it was an XML. Actually, because I tried so many different ways, and some of it worked, some of it didn't. But the easiest thing to do was export an XML from Final Cut Pro 7, open it in Premiere, export it from Premiere into DaVinci, export DaVinci into Final Cut Pro 10. And that was the cleanest, best version.
At that point.
At that time in like 2017, 18, something like that.
Right.
Well, when did I start doing it? No, I guess it was 2018, right, Charlotte?
Would have been, I mean, in terms of when the edit was done?
When color correction started was around 2018, I think. End of 2018?
Color correction, I think, was maybe December 2018, but we were mostly doing that in early 2019.
Okay. Yeah. That's what I'm thinking is I was starting to set it up in 2018, and 2019 January is when it really took off.
Yeah. I mean, as with so many, indie films, fundraising was a iterative process that went on for many years. So it took a while to make this film. And yeah, so I think that would have been 2019.
So we have a couple of questions. Did you have a script, or did you craft the film largely after the shooting?
Thank you for that question. Yeah, I mean, this film was definitely shot in the tradition of cinema verite. So we had no script going in. I kind of just went in there knowing that these were incredibly interesting people and that I was interested in the story from like a family history perspective, because my great grandfather landed on D-Day. And I just kind of went with the flow and allowed the story to develop and surprise me as it developed. And then when it came to creating narration for the film, because there is narration, largely that was developed using my journals from the time. So that, I did all the writing for the narration. So in that way, I guess that could be seen as a script, but that was done afterwards. And it's kind of an experimental script. It's,
Right, right.
It's not the kind of narration you'd expect.
So you didn't feel that you had enough to do besides shooting 6 to 8 hours a day, besides ingesting. You also kept a diary, a journal on top of that? Handwritten one?
No, I typed it.
Okay.
But a big part of the reason why I wanted to keep a journal is because I knew I was getting so little sleep and I was so tired that it would be easy to forget a lot of these details that, were so emotionally charged and mattered so much to me. So keeping a journal in every possible spare moment that I had meant a lot to me at the time and ended up being very useful later.
Absolutely. So
it was a great way to set tone for the narration, because especially on first-person documentaries, getting the tone right, how you say, I felt this, we felt that, can take endless amounts of time. And taking Charlotte's actual words from the journal entries sort of gave us a pre-existing tone and voice. It was really helpful.
I just don't know how many hours a day you spent. I mean, journal, doing the ingest, doing the shooting. I mean, it's like burning both ends of the candle.
Absolutely. And, because it was one summer, it was possible to do that. I'm shooting my next film now, and that way of having it be completely all consuming of your entire life is unsustainable. So I've been, trying to develop a different approach. But yeah, it was a crazy time. Not gonna lie.
So my friend Jeff Arbaio says, did they do color correction in Final Cut Pro or use a post house?
I did everything in Final Cut Pro 10. All the grading was done in Final Cut Pro 10. Oh, and I wanted to add that, yes, it was pluralized. And we used a company, I think they did X2 Pro. They also make X2 Pro. A previous iteration also helped us in the exporting of the Final Cut Pro 7 to X, I think they called it, or something like that. Maybe it was Digital Rebellion, but I don't know who originally wrote the software anymore.
Right.
But all color correction was done inside Final Cut Pro 10.
That's interesting because you were going back and forth through Resolve, and Resolve was known for, DaVinci Resolve was known for the color correction suite. More than anything, it's known for that. So a lot of people use DaVinci Resolve for color correction.
Well, I certainly could have used it, but the problem for me was going back and forth since I was not just using DaVinci. If I used only DaVinci, then I would still be bouncing to Final Cut Pro 10 for other effects that I would be getting through, things I use for Final Cut Pro 10, neat video and things like that wasn't really ready yet for Resolve, for example. And then there were other things that I took to some of the Adobe products, and so I just needed to be able to bounce back various things. And rather than going to Adobe products or going to DaVinci products, I decided to stay within the Final Cut Pro 10 system, because between Core Melt and Neat Video and Cinema Grade and Picture Instruments Color Cone and Lawn Road Precision Color and the Motion Graphics suite of the M suite, you really end up with as powerful as anything that DaVinci can do. And what's really funny is when I took the film to have the DCP made, the guys were really impressed with my grade, and they were saying, yes, but you can't do this in Final Cut. And I'm like, well, actually you can. You do it like this. And they would say, no, but you can't do that in Final Cut. I'm like, well, actually I did that, and yes, you can. And then they said, but then you can't do this. And every single thing they told me I couldn't do in Final Cut, I could only do in DaVinci. I could do it in Final Cut, and better and easier. So please, it was a no-brainer to stay in Final Cut Pro 10.
No, I agree. One of one of the interesting things that I find in the development of Final Cut is sometimes, well, with Apple as well, but in Final Cut specifically, they tell us, oh, no, you don't want that. You want this. For example, how many years do we have to use the color board rather than color wheels?
Right.
They said, no, you want the color board. The color board's the way to go. And professionals said, no, we need curves, we need wheels, we need whatever. And finally, they relented and gave us color wheels, which is what I use when I do the coloring.
Right. And so for me to think about using After Effects or using Neat in other things when I could do anything that After Effects could do for the purposes of what was required for this film. Now, of course, there are things that you'd want After Effects for.
Sure.
I mainly was using Motion and Final Cut Pro 10, and it served our purpose. So I edited all of the promos and the trailers and things in 10, and then I made sense to do the color correction in 10 as well. But I'd also already done the color correction for 2 other films in 10 at that point. So
Gotcha.
79 Parts, which you guys had interviewed me about. And I also did another big film called Yasuni Man, another feature called Yasuni Man, which we did entirely in Final Cut Pro 10. And so this is, Sunken Rose was the 3rd feature that I did color correction, that I did the grading on for a feature with Final Cut Pro 10.
So it seems like you all get along really, really well. So you couldn't convince Mark to use 10?
No, there's no point.
No point?
Lydia suggested it. I did get to learn it more, but you couldn't do asynchronous trimming.
Right.
I built with nest structures, which is sort of an accidental thing Final Cut 3 did. I like to stack videos. So there were a number of things. And back then it was difficult to turn off the magnetic timeline, which is no longer true with Final Cut 10. But so yeah, we had discussions on it. But,
yeah. So
it made my life a little bit harder by many hours. But the thing is, it's not about the tool you use; it's the product you make. And Mark should be able to use whatever tool makes him most comfortable to do his best work. And
no, absolutely. Absolutely.
And so we need to work together. And then Charlotte's next film, which has been in production since July, or June or July, is I'm doing the pre-production right now, the pre-production assembly of video and stuff using Kino, and Mark is probably going to be using Premiere, I think, right, Mark? Or we're debating between Premiere and Avid.
That's still undecided. Yeah.
Right. And so it's unlikely that Mark is going to switch to Final Cut Pro 10, but I will still grade it in 10, and I'm editing another feature now in 10. So
right. My second NLE is, well, I like LumaFusion a lot on the iPad. I think it's fantastic NLE.
It is.
And I wish I've interviewed them 6 times, the people from LumaFusion. And I always ask them, is it coming to the Mac? And they said, yeah, maybe, we'll see what happens going forward. But they think their forte is still the iPad. If they brought it to the Mac, I would just absolutely love that. Not that I don't mind the version that's out now. But my second computer version of NLE is I like DaVinci Resolve a lot. The editor, I like the NLE a lot. So if Final Cut, something happened with Final Cut, I would just go right to DaVinci Resolve.
Right. I would like Mark to take a look at the DaVinci Resolve. I think it has all of the best of Final Cut Pro 7, Premiere, and 10 in one product. I don't think it's quite ready for us to edit a feature on, though, yet. And so although it's extremely powerful, I would have to have, Mark would have to have the final word on whatever you want to edit with.
Of course.
That's nothing to do with me.
Of course.
For me, it's most important is that I support him in whatever he wants to do. But I think it's a worthy thing to look at.
No, it is. Especially you can use the free version to try it out forever. There's no restrictions. I mean, you don't have all the features of the studio, but I bought the studio version last December, a year ago. So the one thing I've learned about learning software is rather than using it and doing a tutorial and using it and do a tutorial, just do a project in it. That's what I've done with DaVinci Resolve. I made myself stay in DaVinci Resolve 100%. And I say, I have friends that know DaVinci Resolve, and I say, how do you do this? Oh, you can't do that in DaVinci, but this is a workaround. So that's how I got through the projects. But that's the way to learn it.
Yeah.
I completely agree. You can take tutorials, but till you do a project with something.
That's the way you learn it.
I learned Final Cut 3 editing Charlotte's 7-year-old birthday video, and then I got a professional job a month later. And I needed that booster, but like tutorials only go so far. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So we have a comment from Christopher. It says, finally tried LumaFusion. It's very fast on my iPad Pro, but editing in Sheffield is all. I'm not sure what that means. With the final part. So LumaFusion actually is on sale right now. Normally it's $29, but it's on sale for $19.99. So grab it. And there's yeah, I have it. I've had it for years. There's some plus they have a Final Cut Pro XML export.
Yes.
If you want to start in LumaFusion and go to Final Cut, it's you can do that. People always say, "Oh, what about Final Cut Pro for the iPad?" This is better. The Final Cut Pro for the iPad would have to catch up to LumaFusion.
Exactly.
There's no way they can get to LumaFusion level and go up from there. They're going to be below LumaFusion and have to catch up. So,
or you never know what they have in the works. They'll probably buy LumaFusion.
I've asked them that question. I've asked them that question when they were on my show, and they didn't hesitate. They said we'd have to see what the offer was, is what they said. But they really like working with in the company that they have. They think they both came from Avid, if I'm not mistaken, if I recall correct. I've interviewed so many people.
Right.
Hundreds of shows, episodes. I'm on here all the time talking about Final Cut. One of my friends, I had Sam Messman and Jeffrey Orthwine on about a month or so ago talking about the Creative Summit because OWC is involved and they were working with OWC. And one of the things that Jeffrey said that stuck with me, he said, "Richard, I really want to thank you for keeping the Final Cut Pro energy level up by doing all these streams and streams and streams. Summertime's the hardest time. Summertime, everything is dead. There's no news. There's no updates typically. So I keep going. I keep finding little things I can talk about and invite the Final Cut Pro community to come on and chat about it. Like this. This is a perfect example. So Mark,
Thank you so much. I'm afraid I actually have to head out. I have another appointment that I have to do. I'm so sorry to say.
That's
but,
okay.
Thank you so much again for this opportunity, and the rest of you guys, please continue to.
Absolutely, Charlotte. It was great meeting you.
Thank you so much.
And everybody go see the film.
Yes, please, and visit sunkenroads.com.
Yeah, sunkenroads.com.
All right, bye.
Bye, Charlotte.
So sunkenroads.com is the website, and all the information is right there. Events, press and honors. There's a lot of press and honors in this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Already.
Really good reviews, yes.
We're lucky in that every review has been stellar so far. So that's lucky.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that luck or is that what you deserve?
Well, we hope we deserve it.
What?
We worked hard enough to deserve it.
I think so. I think absolutely. Let me just check this on real quick. I'm going to switch, since we have one less, I have to switch to a 3-up layout, which I'm doing behind the scenes. There we go. Ta-da, 3-up. I had that, I wasn't sure. I always have 3 or 4 layouts. I make the cutouts in Keynote. I make the design in Keynote, and then I cut out the center for transparent, and then I bring the actual graphic in as a PNG, and then I punch in the video. This is why I use Ecamm. This is all Ecamm stuff, Ecamm Live. I've been using it for years. I bought the app just before they went to subscription. Now they're on subscription only. But I end up subscribing to get the pro features anyway. So we have a comment from Christopher. So we have a couple of comments. What a great show. Thank you, Richard, for putting this together. Thank my guests, of course, all three of you. Fantastic. And says, Richard, you keep getting us up on that soapbox and preach Final Cut Pro. You're a deep well of wisdom. Listen, I'm on the Apple website for two different things. I have Final Cut Pro Radio, the podcast, and then this live stream stuff, and I have FCPX.tv. And I like that they say, Apple themselves, because they put it up, I do Final Cut Pro commentary, because I don't just praise Final Cut Pro. I also critique it when things are going, when I think things can be done better, I go ahead and say it. I said, that's what I do. I absolutely do commentary. So Christopher says, I was checking out the doc earlier. Bravo, kudos. I highly recommend it. You don't, when you're watching it, you don't even think Final Cut Pro, Avid, whatever. You don't even think that. It's just an emotional film. It's very, very, very well done. So who did the music? I forgot to ask.
We had two composers. Jordan Plotner was a associate of Charlotte from undergrad, and he wrote the majority of the music early on. And then he had to leave the project, and Mark Suazo came on, who I've worked with on various things, and he focused on one section of the film. But it's interesting. Most people can't tell that they're two composers. That was an interesting process.
Right. But I enjoyed the music because sometimes people get too music heavy in their productions. There's too much music because music carries so much of the emotion. But when it's subtle, that's when it really, really is effective. And I thought that she did a great job of mixing that. It was mixed. Where was it mixed? I think I saw a note.
Warner Brothers.
Yeah.
Okay. So what did you send?
It was mixed at Warner Brothers on off hours with.
Sure.
Yeah.
What did you send them?
Mixed it. It was tremendous, and they just gifted us a lot of hours. So.
They sound edited it too, so they did an amazing job doing a great sound edit.
No, absolutely, I agree. So what is? I forgot to ask Charlotte before she left. What project is she working on next?
She's working on a project that is working title called Afterthought, and it's focusing on COVID memorials and how we are memorializing COVID or not memorializing it. And she's looking at a major city in the United States, and what is going on at a grassroots level, and then also focusing on one artist and a personal memorial for someone they know.
Okay. So Lydia, what are you working on now? What next?
I'm working on a film I'm working on Charlotte's film doing technical producing, and I'm working on a film called A Light in the Darkness, and that's about the world's aquifers. And it got sidelined for about 20 months trying to avoid COVID
Sure.
because the shoot is taking you all over the world to the aquifers under China. Particularly, we can't get to China yet, so we've got about 8 shoots left of this film before we can actually start putting it together. And it's also a cinema verite kind of a style film, so we're not going to start putting it together until all the shoot is done.
Sure.
But I'm syncing dailies and, watching them and coordinating along Kino. I'm actually using a combination of Kino and Keyflow Pro too, because Kino can't look at some raw footage and Keyflow Pro can. But
oh, really?
But Keyflow Pro creates a database, and I don't like working inside of a database because sometimes databases break, and sometimes you get upgraded out of the system. For instance, going to this latest OS, it doesn't work. So I find Kino to be much more reliable because it's Finder based. And so I don't have to worry about that. But I like the way Keyflow Pro creates such tiny portable proxies that still look good. And so I'm working on that with A Light in the Darkness right now. We have about
I have both of those Kino.
72 terabytes of material so far.
Listen, speaking of that, I got this. This is my new MacBook Pro. I got the M1 Max 16-inch, and my old RAIDs don't mount. I have yeah. Well, I was kind of expecting that. So I have a Promise, Thunderbolt 2 Promise, and I have a Thunderbolt 2 G-Tech.
And they're not mounting with the M1?
Not with the M1. And M1 is the issue because I tried my 2019 Mac Pro on Catalina, Big Sur, and Monterey, and they mount on all three of those OSs on the Intel machine.
Right.
But the brand new M1, they don't mount. So I got to do something. I got to have some.
I know that's what happened to me with when I went from the Mac Pro trash can to which I started Sunken Roads with a Mac Pro trash can. So I guess it was I want to say 2013, the very first Mac Pro trash can. That was, I had a number of towers connected to it, but as soon as I moved to the 2017 iMac Pro, the Pegasuses did mount, but the SanDisk ones didn't mount, so it was so frustrating because that was two sets of 42 terabyte towers that would not mount. And it wasn't only that it would not mount, it's that the Helium 2 from OWC also wouldn't work because it wouldn't take the cards, and the cards were out of date and all of that. So that was really, really disappointing because I'd already sold the trash can before I bought the iMac.
Right.
And so I had to bring it all downstairs to an older iMac and try to mount it that way. But it was really too much for the older iMac. It's been such trauma. I try to stay away from RAIDs and from database based situations where things can break or hardware can break and you lose everything.
No, I'm having that problem right now with deciding which way to go. I'm not going to jump into anything, but I'm looking. The reason I want a RAID is for the speed. If I get an 8-disc RAID, Thunderbolt 3 connected, there is one YouTube, and the other thing is do I get a NAS? Do I get an actual direct attached storage RAID? Do I get a Jellyfish? Mm-hmm. There's one guy on YouTube that he had some kind of an 8-drive NAS that he was getting like 3,300 megabits a second. Mm-hmm. Megabytes a second, I mean. And I'm like, wow, that's faster than anything else, because I was talking to OWC just yesterday about it there, and they're saying, the specs say like 2,700, but realistically you get 15.
Well, I can tell you my two old Pegasus 2 on Thunderbolt 2 are faster than my SD Thunderbolt 3 SSD OWC towers. So I have two right now on this iMac. Behind this iMac, I have two old R8s, Pegasus R8s, and they are considerably faster than the two SSD Thunderbolt 3 OWC ones because there are fewer drives in it.
Right.
And the R8, just between all those drives, you can really get speed. But backing up, that's what I work with. But when I back up, I back up into individual drives. So if a project is 4 terabytes worth of material, I have an 8 terabyte drive, etc. I'm not going to trust my backups to RAIDs anymore at all.
Well, I back up my RAIDs with two 8 terabyte drives all the time.
Right.
So I have
Right.
two separate 8 terabyte drives, and I label them, and I catalog them with NeoFinder. If you don't know NeoFinder, I highly recommend NeoFinder. It's the best. It used to be called CD Finder. That's how old it is. And they just have a brand new version, and they'll go inside of Final Cut Pro libraries, if you want them to, and catalog what's inside, all the clips that are inside the library. And of course, it does Finder level stuff. So I can, at any point, I have so many hard drives. Literally, I have 50 hard drives over there on my shelf. It knows what's on every single one. You have to update it, of course. It knows what's on every single hard drive. If I got to get a clip from Aunt Matilda, I just punch it in there and it tells me what drive to mount. And I always have at least 2 drives.
Keyflow Pro does that too. It keeps track of everything that's on every single drive, and so does the Kino keeps track. I'm not sure if Kino does, but I know Keyflow Pro does. I agree. I do at least 2 backups. Generally, I do 4, sometimes 5. With Sunken Roads, we had 5 backups plus triple backup of the original original. So I just do not trust drives at all.
No, I don't either. I absolutely do not. It's so funny to me when they started, 10 years ago, and they started talking about tapeless acquisition. Tapeless. And then they say, well, how do you back that up? Well, we go back to tape. We go to LTO tape. What?
Right.
I thought it was tapeless.
Head explosion.
It used to be I had a tape sitting right, have them right over there, sit right here. This is one of my archives, but of course you can't depend on that. So Jeff Obayo says, my friend says, didn't know about the Pegasus not mounting on the M1. I have 2 plus a G-RAID Thunderbolt 3. I hope G-RAID works on Thunderbolt 3. Mine were Thunderbolt 2, Jeff. I don't know about the Thunderbolt 3 if they're mounting or not, but I am not going to invest in another hard, RAID system until everything gets sorted out. Monterey and M1 Max, they have to work on the M1 Max. I use the OWC dock. I have their Thunderbolt 4 dock. And the oddest thing is I use one of these for, if you can see that, I'll put it over here. I use one of these to attach my GH4 camera, the Camlink 4K. It doesn't work in their dock. It does not work in their dock. The Camlink 4K does not work. So that's a problem. And I've been going back and forth to support with them. And of course, they're saying, well, it's the 4K. I'm saying, no, it's not necessarily, because it works directly plugged in and it works in other docks. So it's like a mishmash. What do you do? What RAID do you buy that works? Which one do you do a NAS? Do you do a direct attached storage?
Well, I think,
but it has to
Richard,
be
you and I
quiet.
are very interested in a lot of new technology. And I think that one of the things that protects someone like Mark, hi Mark, is that he really makes sure that what he uses works, and there's no jumping to anything until it 100% works. And I admire that.
Mark, what are you working on next? What's your next project?
A film that was originally shot even earlier than Sunken Roads. It's a film called Golf Alpha Yankee. Rick Flynn's the director, and it's another first-person documentary where he met a group of guys. They were a group of different Iranian gay guys who are exiles from Iran in Turkey. But the film is really about what life is like as an exile and the sort of boredom of it. And some of these guys had some very dark stories, but the film is mostly just humorous. So it's a lovely balance as an editor where there's always just funny stuff with the guys hanging out together that I can counterbalance with the dark material.
Yeah,
and Mark just had a film premiere. What's happening with that film that ended recently? That you just
called Civil War, or the title Civil War, or Who Do We Think We Are, which is it's on Peacock. It was on MSNBC. Rachel Boynton was the director, and it's a discussion of how different parts of the country view the Civil War and Reconstruction. And she had an incredible ability to get everyone to talk to her at a time where that's not such an easy conversation.
No, that's not.
Yeah.
Speaking of dark subjects and then humor blended it together, I don't know if you've seen Ricky Gervais's Afterlife series.
I have
No,
I
I've heard
saw
of it.
one.
Phenomenal.
I saw
Phenomenal.
one episode. Yeah.
And so he has 2 seasons. I think he's doing the 3rd one now. I think it's on Netflix. I haven't watched the 3rd season, but he just it's, you know, you laugh in 1 minute and then you got tears in your eyes the next minute. It's just absolutely incredible. So Jeff, our buyer, says, what does Mark store his footage on? Do you have individual hard drives that you use?
So on Sunken Roads, I did. So Lydia basically made a mirror of her hard drive, so it'd be the same. My current project, we're working in Premiere, and it's a team project, which I've not worked in before, which has some things that that make me quite nervous, and other things that work great. But so I have a drive that's a shared Dropbox, and if our assistant or if Rick puts stuff there, when Dropbox syncs it, then we're all in sync. But it has some bumps.
One of the things that the new version of Final Cut 10.6 brought forth was watch folders for compressor. You know, I don't know why we didn't have them over the last 10 years, but I'm glad we have them finally now. So you can put stuff in a watch folder. And as a matter of fact, the Final Cut Pro team at the summit, they had a workflow that you put the watch folder in iCloud. And people, I don't know the exact workflow. I hope they do a white paper on it. So you put the watch folder in iCloud, and anybody can access that watch folder. Anytime it's updated, everybody knows what the updates are, and it can be distributed.
I think that Kino has excellent watch folders as well.
Right.
Not Kino, Keyflow Pro.
Keyflow Pro
has watch folders. And so at any time anybody drops things into the watch folder, everybody who's a member of that watch folder can see it, or a member of that project can see it. And so that's pretty powerful.
Yeah, it is very powerful. So are you keeping up with Final Cut Pro, Lydia, the 10.6 version versus the 10.5 version versus 10.4?
Yeah, because I mean, I've just been using them. I've not really done any deep dive on what's new. I still have been using it, but because I'm only syncing and syncing using Tentacle and organizing footage, making selects, that kind of thing, just kind of getting used to things. Doing that in mostly Kino. So I only crack open Final Cut Pro 10 to edit a promo, edit a music video, that kind of thing, little things that are shorter, under 10 minutes kind of. And so that never, really, since I work really fast and I don't need many of the new things that Final Cut has, I haven't explored it deeply yet. But It's one of my things I'm also in the middle of a move, so I'm moving from Brooklyn, New York to Plymouth, Massachusetts, and everything's in boxes. I have half my edit room in Plymouth, half my edit room here for the last year.
Wait a minute. You're moving from New York to Massachusetts in the winter?
No, I've been moving to New York, to Massachusetts since December last year.
Well, it's colder up there, It's colder in Massachusetts.
Not in Plymouth though. Plymouth's on the shore. So New York's on the shore, Plymouth's on the shore. It's pretty temperate there.
Gotcha.
You get snow as soon as you get a few miles inland. But when you're right on the coast, it's pretty temperate. I was there just this past weekend, and I stuck my toes in the ocean, and it was still warm.
Wow.
Which it really warms up September, October. It takes all year for it to warm up. But,
well, Final Cut Pro 10.6 has 2 features.
Yeah.
They went from 10.5.4 to 10.6. And the one feature is really big. They have 2D motion tracking now.
Oh, cool.
So that's brand new. It's a big feature. The second feature is only if you have an iPhone 13, which this is the strangest update cycle that they've been doing. I know. For 3 years now, they've been doing these odd little patchy updates. So the second feature is the cinematic mode of the iPhone 13. But if you don't have an iPhone 13, you can't use that feature.
I part of the reason I bought the iPhone 13 was the cinematic feature, and that it worked with Final Cut. I really like that. I
do too now.
If
Yeah.
you don't know the cinematic feature, in one of the things you can do with the iPhone 13, which you couldn't do before, is you can change the focus after you shoot in video. That's pretty spectacular. You can change
Well,
your depth of
yeah.
field. You can change the lenses entirely. I mean,
Yes.
everything can change. It's going to shoot RAW now it shoots ProRes RAW now with
No, ProRes, not ProRes RAW.
ProRes 10. But if you're using Filmic Pro, I believe the new one is ProRes RAW, isn't it? The newest one?
Not ProRes RAW. They have a RAW. They have a RAW thing, a setting that you can use, and it also shoots ProRes, but not ProRes RAW.
Oh, I thought Filmic Pro, the newest one that's about to come out, did ProRes RAW. But anyway, it's very nice that you can shoot ProRes and
absolutely
without having to know. I mean, all this making new video is important. I have to do it anyway when I'm syncing, because I don't leave files synced together in case they get broken later. So I always export a multi-track video. So there'll always be new ProRes files for me, but it's a much faster convert.
Right. So I don't know if they can do ProRes RAW on the phone, because I don't know. You need to have a sensor that outputs raw data. I don't know if the phone sensor can do that. I guess it can do the phone RAW, whatever. I was talking to somebody. Plus, the other feature that I hear all the time for Final Cut is, when is it going to support BRAW? And then you go back, when is Resolve going to support ProRes RAW? It's back and forth, back and forth.
Right. And since I don't care about DaVinci that much, except as a thing that I move it between, like if Mark decides to work in Premiere, I'll again be using DaVinci to move things from Premiere through DaVinci to Final Cut Pro 10.
Right. Right. Mark, do you prefer Premiere, Final Cut 7, Avid? Of those three, the ones that you use, do you prefer one over the other?
I'm a little agnostic.
Okay.
You know, I've been using Avid the longest, and they have a long record of horrible customer relations. So, you know, they've given the market away 3 times. But so when I go back to it, it's usually because it's a TV show or it tends to be more formal things, you know, networks or whatever. It's like, we only do Avid. Otherwise, it's shifting to Premiere. It always takes me about 3 days to shift between. I compare like the difference between Spanish and Portuguese, because they're like, to use either of them well, you have to actually edit in a different way. And I've done both of them a lot, but I have to shift back over to that other way. So I like different things about both of them.
I feel the same way about going from Premiere to Final Cut Pro 10 to Avid. It does take 3 to 4 days for me to get my head space into where I need to be efficient. And at this point, I edit with Premiere so rarely that I just basically don't take Premiere jobs anymore.
Is that right? I was going to offer you one. I was going to pull it up here. This phone call was going to ring and said, "Do you want a Premiere job?"
I'm just not interested. I don't see the point if I can. And in fact, whoever I'm working with doesn't need to know what I edit in.
Well, that's absolutely true. So I always use Final Cut first, because I've been using it for 20 years, 7 and then the 10. But I could do something in Resolve as well. I don't do Premiere because I'm not going to subscribe, at this point.
It's so annoying. Yeah.
That's part of my problem.
Well, the problem is the model subscription. It's not the subscription itself, because like this Ecamm that I'm using is subscription. So it's not that. And I have other, so let me just show you my screen here. Here's my screen. This is what I'm looking at right now. So I have a preview monitor, a program monitor. My audio's down below. Audio's right down here. Where is it? Right below there, my audio level. There's scenes like layers, like in Photoshop. There's different cameras over here. Over this side is the green room where you guys are. Comments are coming in. This is what I have to work with while I'm talking to people. So, but this is a subscription. But the Adobe subscription that breaks your app if you stop paying them. The current version of the app you have on your hard drive stops working if you stop paying. So if you're 80 years old and 90 years old and you just want to edit family videos, you can't without paying the monthly fee. That's what I don't like.
And for me, because I'm heavily, as most editors are, heavily involved in customizing the software, I had that happen twice. You know, I was like, okay, I'm doing an Avid job for a year. Why keep up my subscription? But the settings have disappeared, and I have to like redo all the customizing. Drives me crazy.
Oh, I didn't know that. You can't save a copy of the settings?
You supposedly can, but it's not only me. For various people, like, oh, we haven't got a conflict, and it doesn't happen. I've done it manually. It's a big headache. So now I just bite the bullet and stay subscribed. But
we use the Avid at NBC, and I work mostly for NBC. Our the Avid settings disappear. You know, when you change rooms, half the time they go with it, sometimes they don't, and re-uploading it and finding that image and corruption. Oh well, you've got to start again, and that happens a couple times a year, and it's really annoying.
You can't save it like on a thumb drive, like preferences, or
no, because we do, but it gets corrupted, and then it's no good anymore.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so that's very annoying. I mean, what I love about using Final Cut Pro 10 is I paid for it years and years and years ago, and I've not paid a penny toward it since.
That's right.
And it's upgraded. It basically upgraded to professional level editing software platform. Around 2014 basically is when I started feeling really comfortable with it for features. And I think that it's really about the plugin network.
Absolutely.
My plugins are so powerful, and of course, by itself, it's not as good as I don't know, some other programs that might have other things built in. But I think the plugin ecosystem is so powerful that it's
huge.
Yeah, it really is important.
So we have a nice comment here. Let's pull this one in. Joining the stream late, watch the trailer, looks fantastic. Where can I view this film? Well, you can view it right here. Sunkenroads.com and events. Oh, I'm clicking on the wrong screen there. Events here. Here's have all the screenings that are happening, and you can watch it virtually. Virtual
and if
screenings.
you're in New York City, we're in theaters starting Friday again,
So it's going to be in the theater on Friday?
It is.
Yeah.
We had a run before, and now it's coming back again on Friday for a week. So it's nice to see it on a big projected screen. Yeah.
No, absolutely. There's certain films that you just want to see on the big screen. I know I do. So do you either of you remember Get Smart?
Oh yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Remember the cone of silence?
Right.
Oh yeah.
So that's what they need in the movie theaters. COVID cone of silence, where they put a cone over top of your head. You breathe in air from outside so you can watch a movie next to somebody. That'll be the next.
We started our theatrical run a few weeks ago, and it played for a week in New York, played for a week in LA. It played for some in Virginia, I think, and North Carolina, right. And then also all these virtual cinemas keep creeping up. We've got more and more virtual cinemas all the time. We did a sneak peek for a couple hundred of the remaining veterans on the 75th anniversary of D-Day at the World War II Museum, and also at the Museum of the U.S. Air Force in Ohio. So the World War II Museum is in New Orleans. The U.S. Air Force Museum is in Dayton, Ohio. And it also played on the ferries that they were taking veterans to Normandy in,
okay.
and the cruise ships that went to that went from U.S. to Normandy played it, and so that was all on the 75th anniversary of D-Day. So a lot of the important veterans got to see it on us because we really wanted them to see it.
Fantastic.
So it was a pre-release, but it's the same film.
Sure.
And it showed in the IMAX theater at the Air and Space at the Museum of the U.S. Air Force, which was spectacular.
Yes.
I had to upres. Of course, this is a 1080p film, so I had to upres the theatrical to 2K and for the DCP, and it looks amazing. 2K CinemaScope, and the 4K really looked great. So the upresing of 1080p was far better than I expected it to be.
Huh. I forgot to mention to Charlotte while she was here that I used to be the post supervisor at the National Archives. I know she got some documents from the National Archives.
She spent a lot of time there.
Because the National Archives has all the presidential libraries under their umbrella, and they have all the, of course, all the military records and all that. I worked in Washington, D.C., but also there was College Park right up the road, which was a much bigger campus. But the original ones right down in D.C., halfway between the Capitol and the White House. It's exactly strategically in between the two. Interesting point, the film, The National Treasure, they wanted to film in the archives in the rotunda where those documents actually are, but at the time we were going under renovation, so they couldn't get in there, so they built their own copy of that. But no, there's no secret message on the Declaration of Independence. That's, of course, just fiction.
Charlotte was an archivist at Yale, and then she was a professional archivist at NBC. And has also done the archives for several films that have been released recently. What was the most recent one, Mark? Do you remember?
There was a
Monuments
film about the monuments coming down in Virginia that she did the archival on, but several.
And she did Joe's Violin that won the Oscar.
Yeah, she really enjoyed doing the archival on this because we got to a certain stage where we need images and we were dealing with things that were on the internet, and then she went down to the archives, and it was fun. I mean, like, every night she would show me the dozen things or the 3 dozen things she found, and she did a great job with that. So yet another hat she wears.
Which archives did she go to? In D.C.?
In D.C.
Yes.
Oh, okay,
DC.
okay.
Yeah,
maybe College Park. Probably College Park.
That sounds familiar,
I don't think
Richard.
so, because she doesn't drive, so it would be. I don't know, maybe College Park.
She stayed somewhere near where it was, though. College Park sounds familiar.
College Park is where it's much bigger. It's much bigger campus. Most researchers go to the College Park. I think the one in D.C. is much smaller. I don't know if they have the military records. I don't remember, but they have records everywhere. But it could have been either one. So, all right. Is there anything we didn't cover? I don't know if we've solved everything, but I know what I wanted to do. One thing I want to do before we get out of here. Let me see if I can do that with this. Here it is. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Today's Thanksgiving Eve here on the East Coast. Well, in the United States, all the United States. Tomorrow's Thanksgiving. Are you two celebrating at all? Anybody having any turkey or anything?
Indeed.
Yeah, we're coming to my house. I'm working 2 to 10 p.m. for NBC tomorrow.
For the parade?
No, the parade is almost over by 2 p.m.
Okay.
But so we're going to go to the parade. Charlotte and I are going to go to the parade to promote Sunken Roads. We're going to be handing out free tickets with free popcorn.
Wow.
To the weekend shows. And then I'm going to rush back here. Charlotte's going to cook in the kitchen behind me here. And I've already made all the pies and the mashed potatoes and stuff and cranberry sauce.
Yeah.
And Mark and Charlotte are bringing other stuff, and we're going to hang out here.
Well, I want to wish happy Thanksgiving to both of you, for sure, and Charlotte as well.
Richard, thank you so much. This is a great conversation. I really appreciate the invitation.
We like the technical things. I mean, my audience is Final Cut Pro based, but it's also post-production based, and I work a lot with audio. I'm audio junkie. Before I got involved with editing video, I had a recording studio through the 80s, all the way through the 90s, reel-to-reel decks that I still have, and they are still operational. The problem is getting tape that works, because tape was a problem.
Gels, right?
It has a sticky shed syndrome. Even, I don't care if they're the Rolling Stones or Led Zeppelin, all those tapes that were in the 70s, they're all, the way you do it is, I had one of the bands that I recorded came back to me, I don't know, was it late 90s or early 2000s, and said, can you digitize, do you have the tape and can you digitize it? I said, oh, let me try it. I tried it and it completely gunked up my Tascam deck. I had to send it back to Tascam in California to get it ungunked, and they told me, don't play these tapes. You have to bake them for 8 hours at 130 degrees in a controlled low humidity, temperature. Then you might get 1 or 2 passes out of them. And that works, because I've done it multiple times since then. So, but I still have the decks though.
After you prep it, you do one pass and digitize it. And
yes, 1 or 2 passes you can get, and then it starts absorbing moisture again. And what happens is it starts shedding, and it just messes things up. Now, there's a new formula of tape that's out. It's not too expensive for 1/2 inch or 1 inch tape. It's it's $100 a reel for 33 reels, 15 inches, 33 minutes. And you do that, but then you got to figure, okay, well, the heads are going to wear out, and the pinch rollers are going to wear out, and where do I get parts from? And
Right.
it's just like I have 3 decks, 3 reel-to-reel decks that I still have, and they still work. I worked with them this year and digitized some stuff further. So that's where I came from, audio.
I spent so much money digitizing the 16 millimeter documentary films by my great grandfather from the 1930s. And the film just needed to be cleaned up, and then it digitized just fine. But we digitized it onto 1 inch in Betacam SP. And now, of course, Betacam SP in 1 inch, no good. So now the film is still in great shape and can be digitized again to digital. But it just goes to show that if you really want something to last, put it on film.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. They know that. They know that now. I mean, it's
it
look
100 years longer than tape or digital.
Look,
because the hard drives and all are still magnetic.
And even records. Okay, records that we bought in the 60s and the 70s, they made a big comeback. They still work. All you need is you need a turntable, but they still work fine. They're not digital. They're not going to, expire, and they're really big right now. Records are big business.
Yeah.
If you have, I still have all the records that I bought. The first record I bought was the Rolling Stones, December's Children. But I remember when Sgt. Pepper's came out. Mm-hmm. I went down to Silver Spring with my mom. She was driving down there, and I knew there was a store that had it. And I had the stereo version and the mono version in my hand. Stereo, mono, stereo. And I bought the mono because it was $1 cheaper. And now that's the collector's item one. The mono version of Sgt. Pepper is the collector's item.
I have them both. I have the stereo and mono versions of all the Beatles albums that were in both. And but I think I play my old Edison wind-up more than I play my turntable.
Oh, okay.
I mean, the old shellac records, from the turn of the century through the 1930s are just divine, and I play them more often than I play even CDs.
Now, you can't digitize those, can you anyway?
Well, certainly I could through a microphone, and I have high quality microphones, and I certainly could do it.
Speaking of the Beatles, Peter Jackson has I can't wait. That documentary. He had 57 hours of film to go through.
Amazing.
In a condensed time. It was January 69 is when this filming started, and the Beatles broke up in 1970. So it's a very condensed era. 57 hours. He's giving us 6 hours. I can't wait. Everything that I've seen, it's just fast. I love behind the scenes stuff.
Yeah, me too.
When I go to the Creative Summit, when I go to NAB, the presentations are fine, but I want the behind-the-scenes stuff. The summit last time in 2019, when LumaForge did their presentation. They kind of took over the super meet. You know, I have behind the scenes footage hours, but one scene in particular, I was walking to the backstage area and I'm in the dressing room and Sam Messman is getting his makeup put on before he goes out on the stage. And I have that on, I have that on film, and I love that clip. I love that clip. It's just before he goes out on stage, he's getting his makeup put on. So.
Cool.
All righty.
What mic are you using, Richard?
This is a Neumann TLM 103.
Nice.
Okay. But
Neumann's my
that's
favorite.
Yeah, I love this thing. This is my favorite. But that's part of it. This is the secret. It's an Apollo Twin X, and I have all these plugins. You know, the Apollo Twin X uses, let me just pull this up here, I'll show you. It uses these software plugins in real time because the Apollo Twin X processes them, not the computer. All those plugins that you just saw are processed inside of this box in real time. So I can use them on this live stream. So, yeah, I love audio. Absolutely love audio. Well, we know audio's 50% or more of good video or good filmmaking for sure.
That was my main goal with Charlotte, with Sunken Roads, sending Charlotte out and doing the boot camp with her, was to she had no experience in production whatsoever, and so she came and did a boot camp with me for a week and a half, 2 weeks, and I had a few weeks to send her tutorials that she could watch ahead of time, and particularly about the camera and those kinds of things. But what do we need most from an amateur filmmaker? And that's good sound.
Absolutely.
And so that's why I gave her the 4 H1s, the Zoom H1s, and I paired it with the Korean mic, Korean lavaliers by HMN Sound, which went out of business or actually got bought out by somebody else when the guy decided to go to grad school, I think. But but they're fantastic little lavaliers. And so to make sure that she really understood how to mic people, how to press record, lock it so it wouldn't turn itself off, that it could record 20 to 40 hours on one little card. And it's, 20, I think it was 48-bit, really nice quality sound.
Right.
And that really makes a huge difference because
absolutely does.
Her camera work was not her number one priority, and that allowed her to focus on the people and the interactions and the just making sure that everybody understood each other and that the camera wasn't in the way of her face. She didn't hold the camera here, she held the camera underneath, or even had it clamped to something off to the side, so that it just was never it was never her number one priority. But sound had to be simple so that it could be perfect regardless. And
so we have a question. Maybe this was already discussed. The aspect ratio of the trailer seems to be ultra wide. Any time to discuss this decision?
Sure. For theatrical release, you use the theatrical trailer. We have a 1080p version of the trailer that is edited slightly differently for framing.
Sure.
And we also have a square version of the trailer. So for theaters, which are showing the ultra wide screen, we have a theatrical trailer. And for people who are watching like a screener on their computer, we don't necessarily recommend the ultra wide. The theaters are actually sending you guys the ultra wide. So if you watch any of the virtual cinema screenings, it will be ultra wide. But I don't know what Netflix or HBO is going to want when we do a digital release. We have both. So that will depend on what they want most. And usually I think they want 1080p for TV release.
Okay. So keep this in mind as you're going forward and making deals for this movie. Blair Witch Project got $1 million at one of the film festivals, and they accepted it. I probably would have as well. It was actually shot in Maryland, right around where I live. Mm-hmm. To date, it's grossed $180 million.
That's awesome.
So they got the $1 million, which like I said, I probably would have done the same thing, but But who was it? George Thorogood or some George Thorogood said, or no, Sylvester Stallone, when he did his first Rockies, he kept a percentage. He kept a percentage, which of course made him a multimillionaire. So always keep a percentage as well as an advance.
Right.
5%.
I think that Charlotte is an excellent businesswoman. I've never seen anybody negotiate like her. I can't do that. And I think that we can pretty much rely on her to get the best deal she can get out of our distributor. She did a great job. It was our very first film festival. She got a distribution offer right there from a reputable, good distribution company, first run, and they've been great for us so far. I hardly
Fantastic.
know. I don't think I know of a first-time woman film director who had theatrical release on their very first film.
Yeah.
It's, pretty cool.
Absolutely. So once again, I'm going to do this one more time. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Because it is Thanksgiving Eve here in the United States anyway. So, and happy Thanksgiving to both of you. Wish happy Thanksgiving to Charlotte, of course. And
happy Thanksgiving, Richie.
I think we've covered everything. I think we've covered all the problems of the world. We've solved them. Everything is done 100%, and then we're ready to go. All right.
Great Turkey Day, everyone.
Absolutely. Talk to you all later. Thank you so much for stopping.